I think it's appropriate in a strange way for Wayne to be with me on the beginning of Black History Month. Because we were raised in a city that's 80% African American. So the sounds that you hear coming from that piano are influenced by the culture that we grew up in, right? And then Wayne would be the first to say that he's the beneficiary of that rich African American culture that infused the Baptist church. You know, there was a segregated church, but surely the white church benefited from the black church music. And surely they influenced one another. And so we're very grateful to be here today. And I want to thank my dear partner Mundo for leading us through an elaborate meditation. He follows in the tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, which is much more elaborate than other forms of Buddhism, but take us on journeys. Thank you for taking us through the chambers of our heart to look at our lives, to examine ourselves. Because these are discouraging times. And in order to change the world, we have to start right here, don't we? We have to change ourselves. I'm using my phone. I'm not texting, promise. But Mundo and I are moving. In fact, we're kind of in between moving. All of our stuff is on the floor in the room we just moved into, completely disordered. I was really lucky to find a tie this morning and some socks and a coat. And I really had to find my shoe. Finally found my shoes. I'm glad I don't have white socks on. But we're moving. We've arrived. We moved from San Jose to Atherton. And the only reason we can live in Atherton is because we live with 8 other people who split the rent up. And it's a wonderful opportunity for us to live in a communal setting. But and therefore I have my notes here on my phone. Chambers of the Heart. If I could title this sermon, that's what it would be called: the Chambers of Our Heart. And I want to consider the chambers of the heart of Pharaoh. Because the story of Pharaoh reminds me of what's happening in the United States right now. It's very much a parallel. One reason that I chose Judaism was so that I could step back into the story, the mythology of the Bible. Judaism each week takes a part of the Bible and reads from that story, and the Jewish people consider themselves to be a part of that tradition. Just like when I was a young Baptist child and hearing those sermons, I thought they were talking about me. We were applying the stories of the Bible to our real life. Today, that's what I hope to do. As you know, Joseph Campbell said, mythology is true, not because it actually happened in the past, but because it happens over and over and over again. That's what makes it true. And tragically, what we're experiencing in the U.S. right now is the same pattern of a dictator gaining more and more and more power. There is some consolation in remembering that this is not the first time that someone has gained power through evil and wicked means. And it also is encouraging to remember that when the people rise together, they actually can overthrow tyrants and reconstitute their nation and rebuild their nation to make it something better than it even was before the tyrant took over. The problem with that said it takes time. And I'm afraid we're kind of at the beginning of the story. And we don't know how long this horror will last. Surely the events of this week and next Wednesday are of biblical proportions. It's not an exaggeration to say that this week and next week will go down in U.S. history, perhaps as the end of democracy, the beginning of a dictatorship. That is, unless something revolutionary happens. Again, that's why I like the stories of the Hebrew people. They are full of triumph over tyrants. When the people joined together and stood up, things changed. This week's reading in the Jewish tradition is the story of Moses when God speaks to him and says something a little strange. It says, "The Lord said to Moses, 'Come to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, in order that I may place these signs of mine in his midst.'" That's easy to say in hindsight. We're reading these words after the events have already happened, but in the middle of it, you didn't know that God was doing it so God could show himself glorious. All they knew is the Pharaoh was increasing the oppression of people who hurt the worst. People who were most victimized became more victimized. And when they cried out for help to the Pharaoh, what did he do? He increased their labor. He said, "Now do more with less." In typical capitalistic fashion, he took from them their ability to get reward from their work and asked them to do more work. That's what the Pharaoh did. And as the people look back on that event, they said, "The Lord hardened his heart." That's what I feel like when I look at the news this weekend. It feels like God is on their side. And God is orchestrating all of this. It feels like God is hardening the heart of our world, only getting harder and harder. But once again, we're only at the beginning of the story. We don't know what revolution is coming. We don't know how this may give us the opportunity to dismantle the system that has been so oppressive to us anyway. And therefore, in the story of Pharaoh and Moses, I have some hope. Because these things are so heavy, let's all take a breath. And remember that although things get bad, sometimes very bad, when people come together, they can find liberation. The words in the Hebrew Bible say to Moses, God said to Moses, "Come to Pharaoh." Why did he say come instead of go? You know, the Hebrew scholars, they always pay attention to every little detail of the words. So the Zohar, the Hebrew mystic writings, say the reason that God said come rather than go is because Moses was already in the house of Pharaoh. Come back to the house of Pharaoh. And the Zohar elaborates even more. It says, go into every single chamber of his home. And the teachers remind us that that's why Moses was so afraid. He was so afraid because to go face and confront the evil that he knew was there was scary. Surely he could stand afar and confront the Pharaoh. But no, he had to go back into the house where he had so much privilege and confront him directly. And the teachers tell us that God also said to Moses, "Come with me. Come in my power as I go to confront the evil that Pharaoh is doing." Moses knew the depths of evil in the heart of Pharaoh. And so today I want to talk about the chambers of the heart of Pharaoh. How can someone be that evil? That's what I think when I see the news. And I try to remember the darkness of Pharaoh's heart. Moses knew that not only was he heartless, he was also lawless, and he was careless. His heartlessness, even when it was exposed, led him to more lawlessness, that he was above the law, to more carelessness in his conduct. I think these three unethical behaviors are described in the book of Micah, which is the parallel verses that are read in Jewish tradition. And it says this: God has shown you, humanity, what is good and what God requires of thee, but to love mercy and to do justice and to walk earthly with thy God. The word is actually humbly, as you know, but humus is soil. So we are to walk earthly with our God. And this command applies to everyone. It applies to pharaohs and everybody underneath it. We must remember that the law is summed up in three commands: to love mercy, do justice, and walk earthly with our God. From kings and all of the folks who kiss up to the king, to all of us, the commands are the same. And so as Mundo so eloquently described in our meditation, when we follow those commands, it has reverberations in the world. If we're going to revolutionize the world, we revolutionize our lives. First of all, it says, love mercy. I think there's only been 2 times in my life when I've 100% looked at another person with 100% mercy. No, those 2 times were not my 2 marriages, unfortunately. I had a lot of love at each time I married. But the 2 times that I felt true mercy was the days of birth of my sons. Because I had no prejudice about who they were. I had no preconceived ideas about who they would become. So I was able to look at them authentically and love them authentically with true mercy. I think mercy is the absence of bigotry. Mercy is the absence of prejudice. Mercy is not having a preconceived idea about who that person is. So when my firstborn Graham was born, I think I truly loved him with mercy. When my second son Carson was born, I truly loved him with mercy. After about a month, I started developing some prejudice toward him. Some bias about who I thought they were. Some frustration, right? And some bigotry toward my own sons. So that's why I think this command is so important. If we can have bigotry toward our own family, surely we need to constantly revise our hearts toward one another and learn how to love mercy toward one another and see each other authentically. I think to love mercy is to authentically love. Anything less has the ignorance of prejudice attached to it. All of our love must have that pure mercy. That's how we love that baby, Hannah. That's how we should love each other, with mercy. The problem is, when people have the heartlessness of mercilessness, And it comes from their ignorance, and it only grows when they're allowed to continue. The second command says this: do justice. Love mercy, but do justice. James Baldwin says it this way. The great Reverend James Baldwin said this: it is certain in any case that ignorance allied with power is the most ferocious enemy justice can have. Ignorance allied with power is the most ferocious enemy justice can have. All the prejudice that people have when they get power, it is the most enemy of justice. So it's not enough. It's not enough just to love mercy. We've got to do justice. Recently, I was glad to meet a family in their 90s, a couple in their 90s, in my work as a chaplain. And she proudly told me that she was part of a reconciling church. And you know what does it mean, a reconciling church? It means that they are accepting of LGBT people into their congregation. And I felt that joy, but I felt a little sadness too. Because my sadness was, I really wish we had more reparations churches in addition to reconciliation churches. I was glad that we've made progress in accepting people regardless of their gender identity or who they love. But boy, we need some reparations churches too. Because we can love mercy, we can fight for equality, but we must fight for equity also. Because as the scripture says, these are the three commands: love mercy, do justice, and walk earthly with thy God. We can't do it 33% right. You can't do it 66% right. We have to do it 100% right. We have to do justice. And lastly, the command is to walk earthly with your God. Unfortunately, the earth is equalizing humanity. The earth is responding to the oppression we're putting on it by affecting all classes of society. The fires that burn in California go into the nostrils of rich and poor, don't they? The pollution in our oceans affects the fish and our food for everybody. It was not until Pharaoh's son died that things started changing. And it seems as though we're in the same situation today. And finally, even billionaires are being affected personally by the oppression that's being put on the earth. And maybe, just as in Pharaoh's time, maybe we will start to have changes in the heart that change the way we treat each other and treat the earth. So just like Moses had to face his own fears and go into the chambers of his own heart and look at his own heartlessness, his own lawlessness, and his own carelessness, we too must do that if we are to confront the heartlessness, lawlessness, and carelessness of our leaders. And we as a community can change that. I said that I'm glad that they're reconciling churches. I wish there were more reparations churches, but I also wish there were some restorativity churches, some restoration churches, meaning that everything we did, from the drinking water out of plastic, we would stop that. The energy that we use would all be solar power, wind power. Everything we did would be restorative in nature. And we would be able to tell the world that we not only love mercy by fighting for reconciliation and equality, not only do we do justice by bringing reparations for the injustices of the past, but we also walk earthly with our God. That we know that the earth itself calls us to change the way we're living so that future generations can have hope. Amen.